All right, Shabbos say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Beautiful daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is Yud Ches 18. We actually got to the top of Yud Ches yesterday. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors for today's share, to thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Nissan. Paul and Kathy Pollack for dedicating all the Shimon Drushos this month in memory of Paul's parents, Shmuel ben Zechariah and Sarah bas Avraham, and to thank Avraham and Shaindy Kelman for dedicating all the Shimon this month in memory of Avraham's mother, Sarah Bryna bas Yehoshua Heschel Zechariah Avraham. We hope that the merits of our TALMUD TORAH, the Neshamos Lavan Aliyah, and the family's Einachama. But so with that, let us begin. So like I said, today's daf is Yud Ches 18, and we are picking up Emeretz Hashem on Yud Ches Amud Aleph, second line down from the top, last word on the line. So here, remember again, the Gemara is kind of rattling off a whole bunch of really fascinating halachos concerning Hilchos Sotah. Kasav os achos umachak os achos. Interesting case. Kasav os achos umachak os achos. So I will say again, remember, often we know when we learn Gemara, we don't ask why. We just try to go ahead and figure out the yesod of the case that the Gemara is expressing. So here you have a guy who, instead of writing the entire parasha Sotah and then erasing it, writes a letter, or for that matter a word, erases it. Writes another letter or word and erases it. And this is so, in essence, he ends up writing and erasing the entire parasha Sotah, just ends up doing it word by word or letter by letter. What's the halacha? Psula. Ultimately, it does not work. Why? Tichsev va'asala koin eskol haTorah hazos. Because ultimately, again, the Torah says, Pasuk says the kohen will perform this for her, this entire Torah. So the Gemara darshans from here, what is the entire Torah? That the parsha of Sotah, well, again, remember we saw in yesterday's daf the three machlokas about how much you have to write, but whatever you have to write, the writing itself must be fully intact at the time of the erasure. So Rashi says over here, Kasav os achos umachka, alamayim v'chazav kasav oshel acharel machka, ad shehishlim es kula pasal d'chsiv es kol haTorah, ad shetei kula ke'echad. So kol haTorah teaches me that the entire parsha must be written at once and erased at once. Incredible. By Rava. It was a very interesting case. Rava asked the following shaila. Kasav beis megillas l'shtei sotos. So here's the case. Rava says you have two women who are both coming to the Beis Hamikdash at the same time. Right? Rachel and Leah. Rachel and Leah are both coming to the Beis Hamikdash, both for the Sotah process. So what happens? If the Kohen wrote two megillas, right? Two different pieces of parchment for each woman, umachkan l'soch kos echad, and went ahead and erased them both into 1 cup of water. So two separate parshios, both erased into 1 cup of water. Mahu, does that work? Now, obviously, the question is, can you give to Rachel to drink and then give to Leah to drink? Does that work? Mahu. So do we say, Mahu, ksiva l'shma ba'inan va'ika? So on one hand, maybe the most important thing is what? Ksiva l'shma. That the writing of the parsha Sotah be done for this specific woman. Was that done in this case? Was that done? No. Yes. That was a 50-50, right? In other words, yeah, right? Yes. Right? Yes. Right? Why? Because remember again, Rachel had her parsha and Leah had her parsha. So there was a specific parsha written for each woman. So on one hand, if we say the most important thing is Ksiva l'shma, mission accomplished, Odilma, Bryna nami mechika l'shma. On the other hand, maybe it's not just ksiva, but you also what? You need what we call mechika l'shma, erasure. Each woman requires her own specific designated erasure. Now, was that done over here? Let's try this again. Was that done over here? No. Right? Why? Because remember again, excellent. Because remember again, in this case, remember again, both pieces of parchment are being erased into the same cup of water. So on one hand, you have ksiva l'shma, right? Remember again, you're writing a specific parsha for Rachel, and then a separate parsha for Leah. So the separate parsha. The mechika, however, is being done into 1 cup of water. So therefore, there's not an individualized erasure. There's only one erasure being done for both women into the same cup of water. Okay. So let's say you do require a mechika l'shma as well. Let's say, remember, everyone's agreeing that you require a ksiva l'shma, right? That's not a shaila over here. So now that we've established that you need a ksiva l'shma, if you say that you need mechika l'shma, erasure, individualized erasure for each particular woman, what about the following case? Machkan bebeis kosos the chazer v'irvan mahu. What happens if you did the following case? We'll say, let's say again, so right, Rachel and Leah both come into the Beis HaMikdash. You're writing each of them their own piece of parchment, fine ksiva l'shma. You're even going ahead and erasing each piece of parchment into its own cup of water, right? The kli chares, into its own earthenware vessel. Okay? So you're doing mechika l'shma. Then what do? You take the two individual cups of Sotah water and you combine them into, we'll call it, right? It's a Sotah big gulp, right? So you're going ahead and you're putting it into one big cup of water, right? One big kli chares. And I will say, what do you want to do? So now you want to give each of the women to drink from that cup. So does that work? Ma'u. Mechika l'shma ba'inan va'ika. So again, let's go through the list. Do you have ksiva l'shma? Yes. Do you have mechika l'shma? Yes. So on one hand, check. Mechika ksiva, or say ksiva mechika. Ol dilma hav la didei kashasya v'hav la did. Sorry, halav dida kashasya v'halav dida kashasya. What's the problem? The problem is when you mix the waters together. Now Rachel drinks and Leah drinks. Rachel's not necessarily drinking of her waters, so to speak. In other words, her waters as defined as the erasure of her parchment, and Leah's not necessarily drinking of the erase of her erased waters. V'emtim salomar halav didaka shasya v'halav didaka shasya chazer v'chilkan mahu. All right, so we'll say now. Watch this. What about the following case? Okay, Rachel Leah. You wrote a parchment for Rachel. Wrote a parchment for Leah. You erased Rachel's parchment into her cup of water, Leah's parchment into her cup of water. Next, you took the two individual cups. You poured them both into one large cup. Okay, and now what did you do? Last step? Then you redivide them again. You pour half of it into one cup, half of it into a second cup, give one to Rachel, give one to Leah. Does that work? Mahu. Yesh breira or ain't breira? See, now watch this. See, in this last step, what's the shaila? Let's remember again, Bryna comes up in every single Masechta. What's Bryna? Retroactive clarification. So do we see now in this last stage, where you take the combined cup of water and then pour it back into two individual utensils, can we say it's been retroactively clarified that Rachel got her water and Leah got her water? So we'll say, so that's the shaila, to which the Gemara answers, Teiku. So we'll say, so remember again, Teiku, understand, Teiku is fine in Gemara. Right, Teiku is fine in Gemara, because often, remember again, Gemara doesn't necessarily have to come to a conclusion. I mean, it does come to a conclusion. Conclusion is Teiku. But the Shah is halacha l'maisa, what he did. So I want to show you something very interesting. So the Rambam in Hilchos Sotah, in Perek Yud Aleph, discusses this halacha. The Rambam says as follows. He says, first of all, it was like kasva shalol l'shma o machkol shal shma psula. So I'll say, so number one, the Rambam paskins, you need ksiva l'shma, the writing has to be done for that particular woman, and there must be mechika l'shma. Right, when you erase it, erasure must be done for the individual woman as well, which means, number one, every Sotah gets her own parsha, and every Sotah gets her own erasure into her own cup of water. Right, that's number one. Or number two. Next, watch this. Kasav shtei megillos l'shtei sotos, umachkan l'soch kos echad, O the soch shtei kosos ve'irvan b'kos echad ve'ishkel l'shteiim psula. So therefore, again, the Rambam paskins, once you say that you need ksiva l'shma and mechika l'shma, even if you were to write two individual megillos, but you went ahead and you erased them into one cup of water, or even erase them into two individual cups of water, and then what? Combine them together, the Rambam paskins pasal. So none of those cases ultimately again will work. And I will say now the last case is interesting. What about machkan v'shnei kosos ve'ervan v'chazer v'chilkan v'shnei kosos? What happens? What about the last case, right? Where I erased it into 2 cups of water, combined the 2 cups, and then what? And then separated them out into 2 cups again, right? So I will say, so in this case again, I have ksiv l'shma, I have mechika l'shma. Okay, so now I've take the 2 individual cups, combine them into 1, and then redivide them. Remember, this was a shaila of what now? What was the shaila of? Breira. The Rambam paskins kasher. So the Rambam paskins. Now the Kesef Mishnah points out on this. He says that halacha l'maisa is kasher b'diavad. So the Rambam paskins that halacha l'maisa you can rely on breira b'diavad. Okay, it's just interesting how the Rambam paskins in these cases. Good. So the Gemara goes weiter. So I said the Gemara goes weiter. Good. So that's but just some important pieces of halacha l'maisa. You require ksiva l'shma, you require mechika l'shma, and mechika l'shma, I will say, means that each Megillah has to be dissolved into its own individual cup of water. Combine the cups of water and have each of them share the same cup does not work. Chazer v'chilkan, if after combining you pour them off into two separate cups, bidi eved, it works, because the Rambam Paskins yesh breira. Incredible. So let's go weiter. Says the Gemara, by Rava, another interesting case here. Hishka b'siv mahu, b'shvaferes mahu. So Rava say, here's the interesting shaila. What happens now? Again, you've made the individual cups, right? So again, I've had the ksiva l'shma, the mechika l'shma. Now each of these, this is a case of one sotah, not a case of two sotas. But what ends up happening? Halacha l'maisa, now you give the sotah the cup with a straw. With a straw. I guess you can put a little umbrella in it also, right? In other words, right, you'll say, so right, this is the straw. So the shaila over here is, she's drinking with a straw. So we'll say, so what's the shaila over here? Mau, derech shtiya bekach, o ein derech shtiya bekach. This is interesting. Is this called a normative act of drinking or not? Or not? That's the shaila. Is this considered to be normal or not? So we'll say to once again the Gemara says, teku. The Gemara kind of leaves this open-ended. Interestingly enough, for some reason, the Rambam does not comment on this case. Which sounds like the halacha l'maisa, again, if this were to happen, you'd be required to repeat the process of sotah. That's what it sounds like, because it would be a suffix d'oraisa. Okay, so by Rav Ashi, they both said, this is an interesting case. Nishbechu mehen v'nishtayru mehen. Watch this. Let's say the Kohen prepares the cup for the sotah, and let's say it spills. But there's a little bit left inside of the kos. So what's the halacha in such a situation like this? In other words, would you have to repeat the process again? Or can we just make do with the amount of sotah water that is left? Once again, the Gemara Paskins, teku. Well, he's open. I will say, this case, the Rambam does mention, so listen to this. Nishbechu, v'nishtayir mehen, lo yashkes ashar. Ultimately, again, if the sotah water spilled, but there was a little bit left in the cup, the Rambam says, don't use it. V'im hishka kasha, but if you did use it, it's kasha, it works. So I will say, so really, what it sounds like over here, what the Gemara is saying, what the Rambam is saying is, that halacha l'maisa, there's a shear for sotah. There's a shear. Right? Just like everything else in halacha has a shear. What's the shear? Well, again, so remember, there's a machlokas in the Mishnah as to how much more water you have to use. But remember again, l'maisa, that's the shear. And therefore the Rambam Paskins, if the water spills, you really should repeat the process again, write a new piece of parchment, dissolve it again to the requisite amount of water. But halacha l'maisa, if you ended up using the whatever is left over, bidi eved, it is kosher. Pretty incredible. So the Gemara goes weiter. Amar Rabbi Zera, Amar Rav, Beis Shvuas Hamuras Basota, Lama. So we'll say, interestingly enough, there are two shvuas, two oaths that are written in the parsha of Sotah. So why two oaths? What the Gemara says, Achos Kodem Shinimcha Megillah. One is for before the parchment is erased. The Achos La'acha Shinimcha, and one is for after the parchment was erased. To which the Gemara says, Maskif la Rava. So Rava says, here's the problem with this. Tarvayu kodem shenimchaga megillah ksivan. But here's the problem. We'll say both of them are written in the section before the parasha is erased. So it sounds like over here that both shvuas are administered prior to the erasure of the parchment. Ela amarava achas shvua sheyesh ima Allah. The achas shvua she'ein ima Allah. So Rabbi said this is very interesting. To which the Gemara says, you're right, there are two different shvuas. One shvua is just stam a shvua, an oath that she did not commit adultery. The second, ultimately, again, is an oath that has a curse attached to it. To which the Gemara says, Hechi dami shvua sheyesh ima Allah. What's the case of a shvua that has an attached Allah, that has an attached curse? Amarav, mashbi'ani alecha shelo nitmes. Here's what the Kohen says, right? I adjure you I adjure you, right? I go ahead and I administer a shvuah to you, shalom nitmes, that you did not defile yourself. Shenitmes, for if you did defile yourself, yavo beich. Ultimately, again, this curse should devolve upon you. For I would say, first wide line, Amarava, here's the problem with that. Allah l'chuda kaima, ushvua l'chuda kaima. I says, here's the problem. The problem with that, I would say, is they're not attached. They're really two separate things. There's a shvua and there's a curse. Here we're making it sound like the curse itself is attached to the shvua, but again, the way you formulated it, they're two independent things. Ela Amarava, rather Rava says, what's the formulation? Ela Amarava, Mashbi'ani alecha, shelo nitmes yavo abech. Right? I hereby adjure you that if you went ahead and you became Tameya, this curse should devolve upon you. Amar Vashi, Aliika, Shvua Leka. That's fine. In that formulation, there's a curse, but there's no Shvua. Ela Amar Vashi. So we're just trying to figure out what's the right formulation where there's both the Shvua as well as the Klala. Ela Amar Vashi, Mashbi'ani alayich, shelo nitmes. I hereby adjure you, right? I administer the shvuah that you did not become tmeya. Ve'em nitmes, and if you did become tmeya, yavo beich. Ultimately, again, the waters ultimate, or the curse should come upon you. Take a look at the last Rashi before the Mishnah. So Rashi says, here's the formulation: Mashbi'ani alayich shelo nitmes, ve'em nitmes yavo beich. Mashbi'ani alayich sheyehei emes masha amart befanenu shelo nitmes. So we'll say, remember again, in the process of the Sotah, again, if she chooses to go forward drinking the waters, she is attesting to her innocence. So she already made a statement that she is innocent, that she did not go and commit adultery. So we'll say, in order to confirm those words, the Kohen makes her swear to her attestation. So right, you went ahead and you said that you are not Tameya. Now swear, confirming that which you stated before. That's the Lashon Rashi. Mashbi'ani alayich sheyehei emes masha amart befanenu. Right? I hereby adjure you, administer a shvuah that ultimately, again, what you said before is emes shelo nitmes, that you're not defiled. V'nitmes, because that's the shvuah. So we'll say, so the shvuah confirms that which she said before, and then ultimately, again, all of the curses. V'nitmes, if you are Tameya, yavo beich hamayim. Ultimately, again, the water should come into you, the water should take effect on you. The kaima shvua aisha shelo nitmes ba'ala shatecho. So therefore, again, I will say also the shvua, ultimately, again, is to confirm. She swears that which she said before is true, i.e., that she did not commit adultery. And the Allah, ultimately, again, the curse is in the event that chas v'shalom she did commit adultery. Good. But I will say that concludes the sugya. Mishnah. Amahi omeres amen v'amen. So we'll see. Remember again, if you notice again the lashon where you saw this in yesterday's daf, already for the last couple of days, is the pasuk itself says va'ana isha amen amen. Right? Ultimately, again, when the Kohen adjures her, right, the Kohen gives her the shvuah. So the lashon of the pasuk is the woman answers amen amen. So the Gemara says, why two amens? Why two amens? So I will say this is fascinating. Amen al ha'ala, amen. Allah Shivua. So we're going to see by the way that double amen actually serves a variety of purposes. So first of all, one amen for the Allah, for the curse, the other amen for the Shivua. So remember again, I will say, this dovetails what we just read before. Remember, there's two pieces over here. In fact, the order is a little bit different. The order is the Shivua and the Allah. Right? First she takes the Shivua. What's the Shivua? The Shivua is she's swearing, confirming that which she already stated. What did she already state? That she's Torah, that she did not commit adultery. Then she swears to that. After that, the Kohen administers the Allah, the curse, that if you did commit adultery, this is what's going to happen. So she answers, Amen, Amen. Amen, attesting to her shvuah, which Rabbi says is interesting. So it shows you in the process, the Sotah effectively goes ahead and attests her innocence 3 times. First, she makes a statement, I did not commit adultery. Then she takes a shvuah, I did not commit adultery. And then she says, amen on her shvuah, which is another confirmation that I did not commit adultery. So one amen ultimately for the shvuah, another amen on the Allah, on the curse. Good. Amen mi'ish zeh, amen mi'ish acher. So I will say, this is fascinating. So remember again, The Sotah process, ultimately, again, is a very specific process, right? Where, remember, how does this all start? Reuven's married to Rachel. Reuven suspects that Rachel is having an inappropriate relationship with Shimon. So what does he say to Rachel? Al tisteri, do not be alone with Shimon. She violates the warning in front of witnesses. She's alone with him. Kidei Tumah, fine. Once she's brought up to the Beis HaMikdash, ultimately, again, to drink the water, right, triggered by a specific act, so ultimately, again, the Sotah water tests her for any infidelity that may have occurred over the course of the marriage, even someone other than Shimon. And that's what the Amen is. So the Amen is Mi'ishzeh. Amen I accept again from Shimon, right, if I commit adultery with Shimon, and Amen that the Sotah water should check me from any other act of infidelity as well. Amen. By the way, we're going to see that this is a theme. Listen to this. Amen. Shalosh atisi arusa unisua. Ultimately, again, amen. That halacha l'maisa, again, whether I committed adultery during Erusin or during Nisuin. And I will say, so remember again, during Erusin, let's analyze for just a moment. Remember again, Erusin is accomplished through kasef, shtar, or bia. So ultimately, again, now remember, what the theme over here, I will say, is that once she is drinking the mei sotah for a specific situation, ultimately, again, the Sotah waters kind of devolve upon any act of infidelity that may have occurred over the course of their marriage. Now look at Rashi, before you turn the page, look at Rashi. It's the last Rashi on the daf, Arusa u'nisua. So Rashi says very important. Rashi says, Ayidei gilgul shvua, humegalgel alehaz nus shel erusin, afapi shelo haya bo kinui, umikan legilgul shvua min haTorah. Shabbos say, this is fascinating. So let's just talk about context over here. What's Gilgul Shvua? Gilgul Shvua means like this, in general. Gilgul Shvua means that sometimes a person could be forced to take an oath for something. Once you're already taking an oath, we could expand that oath to then make you swear about other things which by themselves would not have triggered an obligation for Shvua. In other words, the logic is, once you already have to take an oath, we could expand the scope of the oath. So the Gemara says the source for that is actually Sotah. Because what's happening over here? Right, the Kohen is administering a Shavua. What's the Shavua? The Shavua is, I did not commit adultery. Now I'll say, the truth is, the specific Shavua that Rachel's taking is really what? I didn't commit adultery with Shimon. We'll say the concept of Gilgul Shvua says, well, once we have you swearing, and once we're testing, ultimately, again, your innocence, we're going to expand the scope of this to extend to any act of infidelity that has happened at any stage of the marriage. During Erusin, during Nisuin. So Rashi actually says that the concept of Gilgul Shvua is learned out over here from Sotah. So quite fascinating. So that's what's happening. That's the Amin Va'amin. The Amin Va'amin says, once essentially we have you swearing about this situation, we could expand the scope of what the Sotah waters are going to test for. So therefore again, Amir Shoshatisi Arusa Unusua, Amin Beis, Vishomeres Yavam, Ukinusa. I will say, remember again, it also applies, we could expand it to Shomeres Yavam. Right? Let's say again the current marriage, right? Reuven's married to Rachel. Let's say the way that Reuven ended up married to Rachel was because Reuven had a brother who died without children. Right? So that's again, so now let's say again, he can make her swear during the time that you are waiting for Yibum. Right? During times that you are not unfaithful. Or Kinusa. Kinusa means after Yibum. Amen Shalom Nitmeisi. Right? She says, Amen, that I did not become defiled. Nitmeisi Yava'ubi. And if I did commit adultery, again I will say, so now what we're seeing is the Sotah waters have a much wider reach than originally thought. Right? Even though the Sotah process is triggered by a specific event, right? Lamaisa, once she is drinking, the Sotah waters have the ability to check her for any act of infidelity, so committed during any stage of the marriage. Right? Meir says, Amen Shalom Nitmeisi, Amen Shalom Etame. Wow. Rabbi say, listen to this. Rabbi Meir says, what's the Amen va'amen? Amen, that I did not go ahead and commit any act of adultery, and Amen, that I will not commit any act of adultery. What Rabbi Meir seems to be saying is that Lemaisa, look at Rashi, Amin shelo tamei. So shem titma la'achar zman mayin ma'ararin osala achar shetetame. Listen to this, Rabbi say. We're going to see now that essentially, once the woman has the Sotah in her system, those waters could check her for future adultery as well. Now we're going to see exactly what that means. But Rameir understands that the Amen v'Amen is Amen for anything I've done historically, right? And ultimately again, Amen for anything I will do in the future. Hakol Shavin, everyone agrees. Shen Masni Ima Lo Akolim Shetis Aris, Lo Achar Shetis Garish. But everyone agrees that the Sotah do not check her for anything that happened before Erison, nor does it check her for anything that will happen after Gerushin. Or we'll formulate this into a principle in just a moment. So the Gemara says, Nistara la'achad v'nitmeis v'achar kachik zira. So we'll say, let's say again, Reuven's married to Rachel, and then let's say what happens. They go ahead and they get divorced. And Rachel is alone with a man during the period that they're divorced. And then ultimately, again, then they get remarried. Lo haya masni ima. The waters would not check her for that particular incident. Why? It was here it is. Zaklau. Here's the rule. Kol shetibav lo haysa asur lo haya masni ima. It will say the Sotah waters only check. Let's phrase it in the positive. The Sotah waters only check her for an event that would have had an impact on the marriage, right? Any event that would not have an impact on the permissibility of husband to wife, the Sotah waters do not check her for. So Rabbi said, that's why, just going through the list now, that's why Allah Chalamaisa, right? Let's say now Rachel's in the Beis HaMikdash, right? Reuven, her husband, was in the Beis HaMikdash. The waters can't check her for anything that happened before their marriage. Why? Because anything that happened before their marriage is not going to have an impact on their marriage. Unless, even if Rachel did have relations with someone before their marriage, okay, not good, right? Might be usher, right? But Lamaisa, again, it's not going to have an impact on the marriage. Same thing, that's why also the waters won't have an impact on anything that happens after divorce, even if they subsequently get remarried. Why? Because anything that happens after divorce ultimately, again, has no impact on their marriage. The waters only check for something, for an act of relations, which would prohibit the wife to the husband. Incredible. So we'll say a lot to unpack over here. Amr Famuna. Shomeres Yavam Shezinsa, Asur li Yavama. We'll say, okay, so back to our Yavama stage. So we'll say, so remember again, let's just play this out. Right? So let's say again, just to mix up the names for just a moment. Reuven's married to Rachel. Reuven dies without children. Right? Reuven leaves behind the surviving brother Shimon. Now Shimon is going to do Yibum with Rachel, but has not done Yibum yet. So Rachel is called in that case a Shomeres Yavam. She's waiting for Yibum. Okay? We'll say, let's say in the period of time where she's waiting to do Yibum with her brother-in-law, with Shimon, she has relations with another man. Right? That's called the Shomeres Yavam. She's in Asura li Yavama. She is Asura to her. She's Asura now. She's Asura to Shimon. Gemara says, where do we get this from? Where do we get this from? Niditani Shomeres Yavem Uknusa. Now we'll say, here's what's interesting. Remember again, what's interesting about this? We get this in the Mishnah. Because what did the Mishnah say? That in our case, where the husband is giving his wife the Sotah, Amen va'amen is he could adjure her, he could make her swear that she did not do anything appropriate when she was waiting for Yibum. Now the fact that the Shvuah could devolve upon that indicates to us that what? That Allah Kalamaise must be that if she did have relations when she was a Shomeres Yavam, ultimately again it would prohibit her to her husband. So Iyamet Bishlama Asira, if you say that Shomeres Yavam Shezinsa ultimately becomes prohibited to her Yavam, Mishum Hachi Masna Bahada, that's why he could stipulate that the Sotah water should check her for that. Elei Amrit Lo Asira, but if you say that they do not prohibit her to him, Hechi Masna Bahada, then how would he go ahead and make her, adjure her for that? But now we learned, Zaklau, Kol She'ilu Tiba V'lo Te'asura Lo Haya Masni Ima. So we'll say, general, the rule is that what? Sotah waters only check for what? A type of relationship that would prohibit a wife to her husband. So the fact that we can make the Sotah waters devolve upon Shomeres Yavam indicates to us that a Shomeres Yavam who has relations with a man other than her Yavam, That's effectively like an act of adultery. To which the Gemara says, Amrima Rava, less hilchasa kerav hamnuna. The halacha does not follow Rav Hamnuna. The Rabbi says, the halacha does not follow Rav Hamnuna. Namely what? That a shomeres yavam, who has relations with another man, that is not tantamount to adultery. It's an issur d'oraisa, it's a lav, but it is not going to be actual adultery. So 1 second. Elahad diktani shomeres yavam ukinusa hamani. So I will say, but 1 second. I just want to point out what's happening over here. Here's the problem, right? We just essentially said that shomeres yavam shezbo. This is a very important case, right? Let's go back for just a second, right? Reuven is married to Rachel. Reuven dies without children, right? What's the halacha? Right now, Reuven goes in and leaves behind the surviving brother Shimon. What's the halacha? Yibum. Okay, so now Rachel's waiting to do Yibum with Shimon, and now she has relations with another man, Bob. Right? Totally out of the family, right? Out of the family. So we'll say, so now, what's the halacha? So the Gemara just said, the halacha is not like Rav Hamnuna. That's not adultery. Now what is it? But it's a lav. What's the lav? V'lo tehei eshes hameis chutza li'ish zar. Remember from our Yevamos days. It's a lav, but it is not adultery. Okay, fine. Here's the problem. The problem is the Mishnah includes the case of shomeres yavam, right? So remember again, the Mishnah says. So let's fast forward a little bit. Right? In our case, Shimon does yibum with Rachel. Now, unfortunately, again, Shimon and Rachel are in the Beis Hamikdash because Rachel is a Sotah. So now Rachel's drinking the water. So the Kohen says, right, you're going to take a shvuah, and the shvuah should devolve upon everything, even that which you did as a shomeres yavam. But 1 second, the Mishnah said that you could only extend the Sotah to relationships that would have compromised the marriage. But we just said that a shomeres yavam shezinsa is not adultery, therefore it would not compromise the marriage. If it wouldn't compromise the marriage, how could the current Sotah devolve upon that relationship? To which the Gemara says, you're right. Hamani, Rabbi Akiva. Remember this Rabbi Akiva? The Amar, Ein Kiddushin Tovsin B'chayvi Lavin, Umashila Ke'erva. Remember again, this is the famous Shita of Rabbi Akiva. Right? Perhaps the most machmir Shita that Rabbi Akiva has, which is, Ein Kiddushin Tovsin B'chayvi Lavin. That Kiddushin cannot take effect when there is an Isser Lav. Right? This is a unique position of Rabbi Akiva. Remember again, everyone else holds that if you try to affect Kiddushin with someone who is quote unquote only prohibited to you by a lav, then what? It works. Rabbi Akiva is the only opinion who says that it does not work. Or I will say a simple case. A Kohen tries to marry a divorcee. Right? Mutar aser. But if they stand under the chuppah v'kiddushin, does it work? According to everyone but Rabbi Akiva, it works. So we'll say, now watch this. The Gemara wants to suggest that ultimately, again, this phrase in the Mishnah of shomeres yavam is actually reflective of the position of Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva holds shomeres yavam shezinsa. She has violated a lav, and therefore, if the yavam tries to marry her, ultimately, again, it will not work. According to Rabbi Akiva, shomeres yavam shezinsa is an erva, and therefore, according to him, the Sotah would devolve upon such a situation. But according to everyone else, it would not. It would not, because there would be a simple case of love. Okay, so I will say, long story short, that phrase of shomeres yavam in our Mishnah is reflective of a very specific view of Rabbi Akiva, of Ein Kiddushin Tovsin B'chayvi Lavin, in which case a shomeres yavam shezinsa would be an Isser Erva. So according to Rabbi Akiva, if the husband is making his wife drink the Sotah, he could go ahead and extend the Sotah to apply even to that case of shomeres yavam shezinsa, but that's only Rabbi Akiva and no one else. Incredible. So by Rabbi Yirmiyah she is now Adam al Nissan Arishonim al Nisui Achev Mau. So we'll say, now watch this. All right, back to our regular case. Right, Reuven's married to Rachel. Now Rachel's in the Beis Hamikdash, right, because she's a Sotah, a suspected Sotah. Right, we're calling her a Sotah, because remember again, a Sotah is the name of the woman who gets herself into this situation. So now, Rachel's about to drink the water. So we'll say, so imagine the following situation. Let's say Reuven and Rachel were married once before. They got divorced, and now they're remarried. It's mutter, assuming two things. Number one, right, that Reuven's not a Kohen. Number two, that Rachel did not marry anyone else in the interim. Right? Remember again, if a couple gets divorced, they can get remarried as long as wife has not remarried someone else in the interim. So assuming those two things, they're remarried. Now they're on marriage number two. Clearly things are not going well, right, in marriage number two, because now again they're in the Beis HaMikdash because she's a Sotah. Okay, fine. Some things are better left alone, right? They'll say, you tried, it didn't work, leave it alone. Okay, fine. They'll say, A forever. So they'll say, so now watch this. So now what happens? Now they're in the Beis HaMikdash. So we'll say, when Reuben is making her drink, right, or Beis HaMikdash is making her drink, so Lamaisa, can he go ahead and have the Sotah waters devolve upon events that occurred in their first marriage? So now she's a Sotah in marriage number two. Can he say, when you're drinking this water and taking the shula, I want it to devolve upon our first marriage as well? That if you committed adultery during the scope of our first marriage, right, that the waters should test you for that as well. Mao. Or, for example, Nisui Achiv. Shall I say, what's the Sui Achiv? Shall I say, imagine for a moment Reuven is married to Rachel, but the way Reuven is married to Rachel is how? Through Yibum. In other words, Reuven's brother died without children, so Reuven married his sister-in-law. Now Rachel is a Sotah, she's in the Beis HaMikdash. Can Reuven stipulate that the waters should check her for adultery committed while Rachel was married to Reuven's brother? Now, by the way, I just want to point out, we're going to see, just so you should know, balance the equation a little bit. The same way the waters check her, the waters check him as well. Whereas we haven't gotten to this yet, because here, this sounds incredibly unbalanced, right? That essentially, again, she's being brought up to the Beis HaMikdash for one potential act of infidelity, and suddenly her entire life is an open book. Right? So again, okay, that's. I just want to point out we're going to balance the equation shortly, just so you understand. No one escapes this. In other words, whatever microscope she's going to be under, he's going to be put under the same exact microscope as well. We're going to see. To which the Gemara says as follows: Mao. So Tashma Zaklal Kol Sheti Ba V'Lo Te'asura Lo Hayamasna Ima Ha'asira Hachanam Demasna Shamina. So we'll say, okay, this is actually explicit. What does the Mishnah Table say? What does the water check her for? Any forbidden relationship that would render her asura prohibited to her husband. So let's play this out. If she committed adultery during marriage number one, would that render her prohibited to her husband? Yes, absolutely. Because remember again, if she committed adultery during marriage number one, she's prohibited to her husband during marriage number one. So certainly if they get divorced, they can't get remarried. Still, you're going to say if she committed adultery while married to husband number one, who is the deceased brother of husband number two, what would that do? Also, we'll say prohibit ibum. Remember again, if she had committed adultery while she was married to her now deceased husband, he would be obligated to divorce her. There's no yibum in that situation. So therefore, going to both say in both of these cases, he could make the Sotah devolve upon these situations. So again, he would be within his right to say that the Sotah should work for adultery committed during marriage number one, or for adultery committed while you were still married to my brother. Both of those cases would work. Rabbi Meir Omer Amen Shlo Nitmesi. So let's remember again, Rabbi Meir says the Amen va'Amen. One tells you that what? One tells you Amen, that I have not currently done anything and that I will not do something in the future. Tanya, Lo Kishon Rabbi Meir Amen Shlo Etame Shlo Titma Shim Titma Mayin Bodkin Osame Achshav Ella Lechisha Etma Mayin Ma'arin Osa Bodkin Osa. Just to be clear, when Rabbi Meir says that Amen teaches that what? Amen, that I did not commit adultery up until this point, and Amen, that I will never commit adultery. When we say the water checks her, it doesn't mean Rabbi say that she's punished now for some future event, but rather Rabbi say, what does it mean? That once she ingests the Sotah remain in her system. So that should she go ahead and ever commit adultery again, chas v'shalom, or ever commit adultery in the future, the Sotah in her system would be activated then. Let's say, if you think about it, by the way, very, very powerful. In other words, once it's there in the system, it remains in the system. Let's say, if you think about it, what a bracha that could be. I was going to say, imagine, by the way, if you had something in your system that was activated every single time you commit an Avera. By the way, we happen to have something in our system that's activated. So it's called the neshama, right? And the neshama is harmed every single time. And it's say, it's such a powerful thing if you think about it, right? That if I knew that if I breached a certain moral code, that the waters would be awakened in my system and harm me, how much better off we would be in life knowing that there's an immediate. Listen, I say, the Tzarim bring down the interesting idea that Klal Yisrael complained to Moshe Rabbeinu about the man, right? They complained about the man, called him lechem hakelkel, this terrible bread. Let's say, right, out of all the things that Klal Yisrael right complained about, it's the strangest thing to complain about man, right? Man is great. Right, you get it. It could taste like whatever you want, right? No trans fats, right? No bad cholesterol, right? It's fantastic. It tastes like what, right? It's delivered right to your doorstep. So I would say, so why would Klal Yisrael complain about the man? So let's bring down something very interesting. Let's bring down this idea. The Medrash says that the man was delivered to your doorstep if you were righteous, right? And if you weren't righteous, it was a couple of feet away. And if you really were having problems, even further away, right? Even more problematic. Or the more you were struggling, the further your mom was here. So let's listen to this. When you woke up in the morning, I would imagine if I was in the desert every morning, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. Why? I was going to say the anxiety of waking up in the morning, and can you imagine, right? Chaim Yankel's walking out of his doorstep. He grabs his Wall Street Journal and his man, and it's right there. Right? Everything is right there together. And me, I'm like, I can't find. Let's say that's anxiety provoking. The man represented, right? Almost like immediate divine opinion of how you're doing. On one hand, that's a huge bracha, right? Because I know every single morning how God thinks I'm doing, right? If I'm doing great, one is at my doorstep. I'm not doing it. It's great. It's instantaneous feedback. Except most of us don't like feedback. Most of us don't, right? We like to say, oh yeah, I love constructive criticism. No one loves constructive criticism. In other words, once I get it, I'll take it, right? Hopefully I'm humble enough that if I get it, but no one's like, please, give me, there are actually some very humble people who dafka really want feedback. They actually really want to work on themselves and improve. Most of us do not like it. So that was why Klal Yisrael did not like the man. Because it wasn't about the taste and it wasn't about the quality. It was about the instantaneous daily divine feedback. It's hard to live. So listen, just according to Rabbi Meir, the woman ingests this Sotah forever. That is part of her. So Lamaisa, again, imagine how that keeps you on the straight and narrow, knowing that there's like this sleeper Sotah water inside of you. In other words, it's there. And if you veer, it gurgles up and ultimately has a negative impact on you. So the point the Gemara is making over here is, it doesn't test you now for something you will do in the future, but it remains in your system, and should she go ahead and do something immoral, the waters will test her then. Incredible. By Rav Ashi. So this is very interesting. What about, listen to the following case. Could a man make a stipulation about a future marriage? And I will say, now what does that mean? If you look at Rashi, I will say, this is Rashi, it's 2, 4, 6, 8 lines from the bottom. Listen to this. Let's say Reuven is with Rachel in the Beis HaMikdash, right? And he says to her like this. They're in the Beis HaMikdash because, again, she's a Sotah. And he says to her, I want the waters to check you now for anything you have done. And in the event that we get divorced and we get remarried, right, the waters should check you for anything that would happen in a future marriage. So Rachel should run as far away from this guy as she can, right? This is you clearly drew the short straw, right? So we'll say, So the shidduch pool was clearly limited wherever Rachel was from. Right? But in any event, does it work? Does it work? So can he go ahead and make it tonight about a future relationship? I will say, so again, she's a Sotah now, and he's saying the water should check you in the event that we get divorced and then get remarried for any immorality that happens in the second marriage. To which the Gemara says, at the end of the day, right now she hasn't done anything. Perhaps one day he'll divorce her. And they'll get remarried. Right? So can the water check her for such an eventuality like that? So Tashma, Hakol Shavin, Shalo Haya Masni Ima, Lo Akodim Shetis Aris, Vela Achar Shetis Garish. Shabbos say here the Mishnah seems to be quite explicit. The Mishnah says you can't make any stipulations about anything that happened before they were married or anything that would happen after they get divorced. In other words, anything before the marriage is off limits, and anything ultimately again after the marriage is off limits as well. Nistara la'achar benitmes li'achar kach yachzirena lo hayamasna. Shabbos say ultimately again. Therefore, lemaisa, if after they got divorced, she was alone with the man, had relations with the man, and then they got remarried, he ultimately can't make the waters devolve upon that, because that was after marriage. The Gemara says, what do you see from here? I will say, but it sounds like in this case over here, where he's stipulating not about really what happens in between the marriages, but he stipulates about what? Should we get remarried? In other words, we'll say, what's Ruvain's logic? Ruvain, the husband right now, essentially wants to listen. This is a very uncomfortable experience. So here's what I'd like to do. Let's make this one-stop shopping. Right? In other words, let's cover every possible scenario with this Sotah. So essentially, again, if they were married before, right, the Sotah water should cover our previous marriage, should cover our current marriage. And in the event that we get divorced and get remarried, the Sotah water should cover our next marriage as well. To which the Gemara says, technically, it works. Again, you can't go ahead and make it devolve upon anything before the marriage, nor can you make it devolve upon what? Anything in between the marriages, but you absolutely can make it devolve upon a future marriage. Because again, they both say the rule is the rule, which is Sotah waters work for anything which would impact the relationship between husband and wife. Incredible. Let's go weiter. TORAH. So, by the way, I will point out something very interesting. The idea, by the way, that Sotah waters does not go ahead and check anything before the marriage is very interesting. Right? Let's say a husband wants to know how his wife was behaving before they were married. Right? So, Lamai says Sotah waters does not go ahead and check any of that. Let's say I find something interesting. Also, interesting is Sotah in marriage. How sometimes you just have to let things be part of the past. We'll say, this happens all the time. Or this is a major cause of shalom bayis issues. We'll say sometimes a couple have a disagreement, have them falling out, and right, everything is quote unquote forgiven and they moved on until when? Until the next fight occurs. And then what happens? The file cabinet is opened, right? And everything comes out chronologically, alphabetically, list of severity, right? And suddenly again, the entire catalog, every transgression is but what's that? I thought we moved on from this. So I will say it's one of the most detrimental things in shalom bayis. Sometimes, in order to go ahead and rebuild and bolster marriage in the aftermath of some type of relationship trauma, a person does have to learn to let go. Forget, it's much harder to tell people to forget. Generally, we don't forget things. But I could let go of something even if I still remember it. In other words, and that becomes a conscious process by saying, you know what? I'm not bringing this up anymore. I'm not referencing this anymore. Because we dealt with it, and now we have to put it away. And it's almost like what Chazal trying to teach us with this as well. There are certain parts of a past of a relationship that just have to be cataloged, filed, and put away. Am I going to forget it? You can't mandate that people forget something. But I can let go of something even if I can't forget it. An incredibly important tool in rehabilitating a relationship in the aftermath of some type of relationship trauma. Catalog it, file it, but then just find a way to let go of it so you have the ability to build moving forward. Incredible. Tana Abanon. Zos Torahs Haknos. Shabbos say, so this is the Torah. Torah saknos means this is the Torah. Kanos means literally jealousies. Melamed sha'isa shosa v'shara. Shabbos say, this comes down to a very interesting sugya, which is, could a woman drink more than once in the course of a marriage? Right? Many of us drink very often in the course of marriage. That's not what we're talking about over here. Right? I'll say, right? We're talking about over here, Sotah, right? Sotah. Can a woman be forced to drink, right? Could a woman be subject to the Sotah process more than once in a marriage? Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Zos, Shaindy Isha Shosa V'Shona. Zos tells you that what? A woman cannot drink and repeat. Rabbi Yehuda, Maisa Dehei Lefanein Nechunya Chofer Shichin. So listen to this. One time, this guy Nechunya Chofer Shichin. I will say Chofer Shichin means he dug ditches. It's so interesting. Why do they call him Chunya? Nechunya, the ditch digger. I will say, look at Rashi. Chofer Shichin Lahachnis Mayim Laoli Regalim Bisalos Ubedrachin. I will say this is so beautiful. Why was he called Chunya, the ditch digger? I will say he didn't just dig ditches. He dug wells. Who did he dig wells for? For the Oli Regalim, for the Yidden, for the Jews who were coming up from Babel to Eretz Yisrael. He dug wells on both sides. So it's interesting, that's how he's known. Nechunya Chofer Shichin. Right? He is Nechunya, the well digger. They'll say, what does that teach you? What a Musar Haskell. They'll say, the greatest accomplishment you have in life are not the things you do for yourself. The greatest accomplishments you have in life are the things you do for your people. Right? Clearly, Nechunya was a big Talmud Chacham. He's not called Nechunya the Talmud Chacham. He's not called Nechunya Hagadol. He's not called Rav Nechunya. Right? He's not called Nechunya. He's called Nechunya Chofer Shichin. Right? Both saying, because the greatest thing you do in life, it's not the Torah you learn. It's not the tefillos you do. The greatest things you do in life are the things you do for your fellow Jew. Are the things you do for Klal Yisrael. What's Nechunya's greatest accomplishment? Not the Torah he learned. The wells that he dug for the Oli Regalim. Is that not incredible? That's his accomplishment. So what did Nechunya say? Sha'isha shosa v'shona. That a woman, Rabbi say, could become a sotah more than once. She could drink more than once. The Kibal way do so, b'shnei anoshim. And ultimately, again, I will say, we accept it as edus, but when is that so? Only with two husbands. Avalo be'ish echa, but not with the same husband. So Rabbi says, so interestingly enough, what they're saying is, Nechunya said a woman could drink more than once. True. More than once, if what? She's married more than once. One sotah process per husband. In other words, what they're saying over here is a husband could never subject his wife to the sotah process more than once. They both say, now the truth is, based on what we learned, it actually makes sense. Right? Why according to Rabbi Meir? Why? You don't have to. Right? You don't have to. In other words, once she's become a sotah, l'maisa again that remains in her sister. Now, both say that clearly we're going to see there are opinions that don't agree with Rabbi Meir. Right? In Rabbi Meir's view, once she ingests the sotah, that automatically tests her for the future. But obviously they're going to be different. So we'll say we'll stop. Actually, let's do one more line. Fine. Avalo say, Eina isha shosa v'shona bein bi'ish echa bein bebezan. Chacham say no. Once a woman is a sotah, that's it. One sotah per lifetime. She can only be brought to the Beis Hamikdash once. Doesn't matter, one husband, two husbands, that's it. So I will say, so this is the fundamental machlokes. Ultimately, again, between Nechunya and Acham. Nechunya saying, ultimately, again, she can become a sotah once per husband, but you can have one who becomes a sotah more than once in her life. And ultimately, Nachum saying that Lamaisa, a woman can only become a sotah once in her life. That is it. The Tanakama, Nami Yaksiv Zos. What do the Tanakama do with the word Zos? So we'll say Zos is an exclusion. Zos means this. This means what? Once. Right? V'rabonon basroi, Nami Yaksiv Toras. So we'll say Torah Saknos is plural. So we'll say, you know what's happening over here? You have competing drushas. It says Zos Toras Hakinos. So I will say, so Zos means what? Once. Torah Sakanos, the Torah of jealousy indicates to us what? Plurality. I love that word. Totally made up, but it's good. Right? So I will say the plurality. Is it made up? No. Oh, so much better when it's made up. I will say, I'll make up something else. I will say, so again, so the plurality of it. So I will say, that's the inherent contradiction in the drashas. So Zos says, I'm going to become a sotah once. Torah Sakanos, plurality more than once. So I will say, so the shaila is, what does the other side do with the other drashas? To which Amarava be'ish echad pligi. So I will say, ultimately again, when it's one husband and the same suspected adulterer, Everyone agrees that what? In Aisha shows Savashona. Shabbos, listen to this, top of your test. Tichsev Zos. Shabbos said, let's go with the keys everybody agrees with. Everyone agrees. Same husband, same suspected adulterer, let's say, no double jeopardy, right? Right? You can't be made to drink for the same man, same husband, and same suspected adulterer twice. Two husbands, two suspected adulterers, two separate guys, everyone agrees that what? She can be made to drink twice. Tichsev Toras. So keep pligi, where's the machlokes? Beish echad ushnei ba'alin, b'shnei anashim ba'al echad. What's the where's the machlokes case? One husband, two suspected adulterers, or two husbands, same suspected adulterer. Tanakama savar Toras l'rabuye kulhu. So Tanakama says Toras comes to include all of these cases. Zos lemeute ish echad u'ba'al echad. Zos comes to exclude same husband, same adulterer. That she can't be made to drink twice. For Rabbanan Basra, the later Rabbanan, they say Zos lemeute kulhi. Zos comes to exclude everything. Toras l'rabuye. Toras comes to include what? Shnei anashim u'shnei ba'alin. Two husbands and two adulterers. Rabbi Huda, Zos lemeute tarti. Zos comes to go ahead and exclude these two cases. Toras l'rabos tarti. Torah comes to include two cases. Which cases are which? Zos lemeute tarti. So Zos comes to exclude two cases. Ish echad u'ba'al echad. Same husband, right? One husband, one adulterer. In other words, you can't, no double jeopardy. Ish echad u'shnei ba'alim, or same husband and two adulterers. In other words, Rabbanan Basra are saying, same husband can never give his wife to drink twice. Toras l'rabuye tarti. Toras comes to include two cases. Shnei anashim u'ba'al echad. Two husbands, even if it's the same adulterer, or shnei anashim u'shnei ba'alim, or two husbands and two adulterers. So I will say, all right, tomorrow we'll pick up with the halacha l'maisa, but I just want to point out again the interesting tension in the drasha. Zos, Toras, Hakinos. Zos, limiting, it's a mute, right, which seems to indicate only one Sotah process per woman, maybe even per lifetime. Toras, Hakinos sounds like what? She could be subject to the same process multiple times, even during her lifetime. Machlokes, again, Rabbanan Basrai, ultimately again, and Rava. We'll see the Rambam Meir Hashem Tanabosai, Hadran Allah Chayamevi, Mazel Tov, Shikayach, what a daf. All right, Chevron on Zoom, have a great day, everyone.
So, she's suspected of being adulterous.